Rachel enjoys her quiet mornings in Miami, painting and walking through the dry scrubland. Her peaceful routine shatters when a strange notification appears on her tablet. A familiar purple bookmark glitches, flashing rapidly as anonymous messages flood the screen. An unknown profile is tracking her daily routes, demanding immediate attention. The digital intrusion feels cold and invasive, turning her sunlit sanctuary into a space of creeping claustrophobia. Instead of panicking, Rachel takes a deep breath and observes the screen. She realizes someone is counting her steps. The peaceful artist must now decide how to protect her independence against this obsessive digital stalker.
The morning sun poured through the large windows of the Miami home, warming the polished wooden floor and illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. Rachel sat at her small kitchen table, enjoying a quiet cup of dark coffee. At 70 years old, the retired painter cherished these peaceful, uninterrupted moments. The smell of oil paint still lingered faintly in the hallway, a reminder of her late-night studio sessions. Outside, the dry scrubland nature reserve stretched out, a familiar and comforting landscape of pale green and brown. She reached for the tablet to check the weather before the daily walk. The device chimed softly, a bright sound in the quiet room. A familiar purple bookmark link on the screen began to glitch. It flashed back and forth, an unusual behavior for a simple saved page that she had used for years. Rachel frowned, tapping the glass gently with an index finger. Suddenly, the screen filled with rapid, anonymous notifications. The purple icon pulsed erratically as new messages flooded the display, pushing the usual widgets off the edge. She leaned closer, a thumb hovering over the warm screen. The notifications were not from friends or family. An unknown profile was repeatedly viewing public posts about the daily walks in the arid trails, analyzing every detail. The messages demanded immediate attention, using urgent and pressuring language. They asked for real-time updates and specific locations along the reserve paths. A cold chill washed over her, contrasting sharply with the warm sunlight filling the kitchen. Rachel paused. She took a slow, deep breath, letting the air fill the lungs and steady the hands. She refused to let the sudden intrusion dictate emotions or ruin the morning. The anonymous watcher knew the exact walking route and daily schedule in the reserve. This was not a random error. This was a calculated observation. "These walks are just for me," she whispered to the empty room. Her voice was steady, measured, and calm. She looked out the window at the dry scrubland, watching the wind rustle the pale leaves. "Someone is counting my steps." The tablet chimed again, another rapid notification demanding a response. The purple bookmark flashed once more, a frantic digital pulse. Rachel did not tap the screen. She did not reply to the messages. She simply closed the cover, placing the device face down on the table. She chose silence over panic. The peaceful routine was broken, but the mind remained clear. She would observe quietly, waiting for the right moment to reclaim the space. The watcher wanted a reaction, but Rachel would only give them calm vigilance. The digital tether was pulled tight, and the silent invasion had only just begun.
Rachel stepped out onto the shaded front porch, seeking the fresh, warm air of the Miami morning. The dry scrubland breeze rustled the pale leaves, offering a brief comfort. The distant call of a mockingbird echoed from the tree line, a familiar sound that usually brought her joy. She sat in the wicker chair, the tablet resting on her lap. The screen remained dark, but the memory of the frantic notifications lingered in the quiet air. Footsteps crunched on the gravel path. Eric, the neighbor and a pragmatic hotel clerk, walked up the steps. He carried 2 mugs of tea, his observant eyes immediately catching the rigid set of her shoulders. He set a mug on the small table, the ceramic clinking softly against the wood. "The morning looks heavy today," he said gently. Rachel offered a tight smile and picked up the tablet. She woke the screen. The purple bookmark was gone, replaced by a new, glaring notification. It demanded a photo of the front door, right now, to prove she was home. The language was rushed, pressing, and entirely unusual. She pointed at the glowing screen, her posture stiff. "He wants a picture of the door, right now," she said, her voice steady but laced with cold realization. Eric leaned in, his frown deepening as he read the urgent text. He shook his head slowly. "That is a massive red flag. Do not give him that power." Rachel looked from the screen to the quiet street, then back to the device. The stalker was no longer just watching. He was demanding physical proof, trying to force her into a corner. The digital tether was pulling tight, trying to drag her into his panic.
But Rachel felt a sudden, clarifying calm. She was the guardian of her own peace. She pressed the power button, holding it down until the screen faded to black. The demanding text vanished into the void. She slid the dark tablet into the canvas bag and zipped it shut, the sound of the zipper final and decisive. "I am done playing his game," she stated, taking a slow sip of the tea. Eric nodded, his shoulders relaxing as he took a seat in the adjacent chair. "He demands immediate attention," Rachel added, looking out at the sunlit scrubland, "but I give him only silence." The porch was quiet again, but the air felt different. The Watcher had made a move, and she had blocked it. Yet as she watched the shadows stretch across the dry brush, she knew the silence would not last forever. The stalker would realize she was not responding, and the next move would be even more desperate. She needed to prepare for whatever came next, relying on her own steady judgment.
The late afternoon sun slanted through the skylight of the painting room, casting long, golden rectangles across the polished wooden floor. Rachel stood at her easel, mixing a pale ochre on her wooden palette. The dry scrubland breeze rattled the window panes, offering a familiar and comforting rhythm. For a few hours, the digital intrusion had faded into the background. She focused on the brush, letting the quiet strokes restore her peace. The scent of oil paint and turpentine grounded her in the present moment. Then, the phone buzzed against the wooden table. The sharp vibration broke the silence of the room. Rachel paused, her brush hovering just above the canvas. She wiped her hands on a cotton rag and walked over to the table. The screen was lit up with a new alert. She picked up the device, her expression calm but watchful. The notification displayed a recent photograph. It was not a picture of the nature reserve or the walking trails. It was a picture of her own closed front gate, taken from the street. The angle was low, the lighting overcast and gray. The stalker was no longer just tracking her daily routes through the arid landscape. They were watching her home. Beside the image, the familiar purple bookmark icon flashed rapidly. It pulsed with a frantic, erratic rhythm, demanding her immediate attention. The digital tether was pulling tight again, trying to drag her into a panic. Rachel stared at the glowing screen. A cold chill washed over her, contrasting sharply with the warm sunlight filling the room. Her physical sanctuary was compromised. The Watcher had crossed an invisible line. "They are right outside my door," she whispered to the empty room. Her voice was steady, measured, and entirely devoid of hysteria. She closed her eyes and took a slow, deep breath. She let the air fill her lungs, steadying her hands. She refused to let fear dictate her life or ruin her sanctuary. The Watcher wanted a reaction, but Rachel would only give them her calm vigilance. She opened her eyes and looked at the phone one last time. The purple icon flashed again, a final, desperate plea for engagement. Rachel set the brush down on the table. She did not tap the screen. She did not reply to the message. She simply pressed the power button, holding it down until the screen faded to black. The frantic purple light vanished into the void. She placed the dark phone face down on the desk. The digital threat had invaded her safe space, but she was taking her power back. She turned toward the hallway, her mind made up. It was time to sever the connection completely. The early evening sun dipped low, casting long amber shadows across the wooden floor of the painting room. Rachel sat at her desk, the warm light highlighting the calm lines of her face. She held her trusted phone, its screen bright against the dimming room. The creeping digital claustrophobia that had gripped her all day was slowly giving way to a quiet, focused determination. She was done waiting. It was time to lock the door. Her thumb moved steadily across the glass. She navigated to the settings, her movements deliberate and unhurried. She found the anonymous profile that had been tracking her steps through the dry scrubland. With a firm tap, she selected the block option. The screen refreshed. The frantic purple bookmark icon flashed one last time, a brief, erratic pulse, before dissolving into a stark gray symbol of a blocked connection. The digital tether was severed. "You are blocked," she said softly to the empty room. Her voice was steady, carrying no trace of the morning's panic. She did not stop there. Methodically, she changed her passwords, creating long, complex phrases that only she knew. She turned off location sharing entirely, removing the invisible pin that marked her home and her walking trails. The stalker demanded access, but she was locking the digital door. She watched the gray blocked link on the screen. It was no longer a taunt. It was a wall. "My peace is mine again," she murmured, setting the phone face down on the desk. She took a deep breath, letting the cool evening air fill her lungs. The digital invasion was halted. Her accounts were secure, her routes hidden.
She had reclaimed her independence without surrendering to fear. The painting room felt like her sanctuary once more, the familiar scent of oil painting turpentine grounding her. But as the amber light faded into twilight, a new sound broke the silence. It was not a digital chime. It was the distinct, heavy crunch of gravel on the driveway outside her front gate. The stalker had been locked out of her screen, but the dry scrubland was vast, and the shadows were growing long. Rachel stood up slowly, her eyes fixed on the darkening window. The digital door was closed, but the physical world was still waiting.
Rachel walked to the front door, her footsteps quiet on the polished wooden floor. The heavy crunch of gravel outside had faded into the gentle evening breeze, leaving only the distant, rhythmic chirping of crickets in the dry scrubland. She reached the solid oak door and ran her weathered hand over the smooth brass of the deadbolt. She turned the lock, feeling the heavy metal slide securely into place with a satisfying, solid click. The physical barrier was firm and unyielding, a simple mechanism that separated her safe interior from the vast, darkening world outside. "The house is safe," she whispered to the quiet hallway. Her voice was steady, carrying no trace of the morning's unease. She moved to the large window beside the door and peered out into the dry scrubland. The pale green and brown landscape was still bathed in the fading amber light of the Miami sunset. The shadows were long, stretching across the arid trails, but the walking path was completely empty. No one was watching. The digital lock had held, and the physical world remained undisturbed. She watched a single mockingbird land on the wooden fence, a small, ordinary detail that grounded her completely in the present moment. She turned away from the glass, leaving the twilight behind, and walked back to her painting room. The warm, familiar scent of oil paint and turpentine welcomed her back, wrapping around her like a heavy, comforting blanket. She sat at her wooden desk and picked up her trusted phone one last time. The screen was dark, but she woke it just to verify the final boundary. The broken link remained a stark gray symbol of a blocked connection. The anonymous watcher was completely locked out of her life, unable to track her steps or demand her attention. "And so is my mind," she said softly, a gentle smile touching her lips. She set the phone face down on the desk, far away from her canvas, pushing it into the shadows where it belonged. He had tried to break in, but she had locked both the digital and physical doors. Rachel picked up her wooden palette and a clean brush, her fingers moving with the practiced ease of decades. She mixed a vibrant stroke of pale ochre, feeling the residual warmth of the sun on her face through the window. The creeping claustrophobia was entirely gone, replaced by a deep, grounded relief. She touched the brush to the canvas, letting the quiet rhythm of her art restore her spirit. The bristles glided smoothly over the textured surface, capturing the exact shade of the dry scrubland at dusk. Her quiet life was fully restored, and her sanctuary was truly her own.